everyone, I am Noor. Welcome to my channel. This is a short audio essay on the concept of the dark night of the soul experience, which is common for everyone on the spiritual path, and it happens at least once in your lifetime, if not more. This is also an experience which is commonly known as Vairag in Hindi and Punjabi. In English, they call it the dark night of the soul, and this is the experience where you feel a sort of loss of a sense of purpose. This is a time when you feel essentially lost, and this is a phase of disconnect with the source and your own self. However, in my opinion, it's not right to call it the dark night of the soul, because it is actually the dark night of the ego. This is the phase when we experience a disconnect with all the definitions of the self, and whatever it is that we were using to describe, to define as our personality, as our sense of self, is what is being stripped away, and that is what we lose a connection with. And this is also a sort of a spiritual depression, or in fact, I think, mind you, I am not a medical practitioner, but intuitively I feel that people who undergo depression are facing a similar experience, and which is why I felt it was important to talk about it, to have a spiritual and rather a higher perspective on this experience. So what happens is that, when we start on the path of spirituality, when we begin to practice, when we begin to do different kinds of meditations or different rituals and practices that connect us to our inner truth, that we hope are going to take us closer to our core reality, and then eventually to closer to the source. So it creates a sort of a conflict between what we rely on so far, because everything that we had been holding on to, we are literally asking the universe to take it all away. And when it does happen, it's a sort of a shock for the personality, because it does not know how else to operate yet. Which is why there is essentially a grieving process that accompanies this state of Vairag, or the dark night of the self, the ego. However, this is, in my opinion, a very, very transformative experience, and it carries within itself the possibility of our highest evolution, and along with that, it is also a test of our inner stability, our resolve for the spiritual path, our surrender. And this is like a rebirth process. One of the stages of the dark night of the ego is the rebirth process, and the deepest and the darkest phase of the process is probably the sort of a chrysalis stage, where you are shedding your skin, and as I said before, there is a grieving process for what once was. There are 4 basic phases that I have come to sort of outline, thanks to my experiences of the dark night of the ego. This is an experience. Before I delve into that, I want to share that this is an experience that you are bound to have at least once in your lifetime, if you are someone who's either on the spiritual path intentionally, or if this is an experience that is triggered by external circumstances and your soul has to sort of your soul and self have to sort of come to terms with how to live in harmony, so to speak. I have, in fact, this is an experience that I've had multiple times in my journey over the last 5-6 years, and which is why the very first time it happened with me, I did not know what was going on. And fortunately enough for me, my brother was able to guide me through it, and he shared a few points which I am going to share with you, and I was able to not just make the most of that experience, but also make sure that I was looking at it in a healthy way. I was eventually able to cultivate a sense of detachment towards the process. And now, whenever it is about to happen, I am able to sort of sense the kind of changes that are happening in my energy or in the world around me, in my energy sphere, and it sort of makes me, I am hesitant to say the word, but there's no other way to put it. I am sort of prepared for it, but nothing prepares you for the real experience actually when it happens. So coming to the four broad phases that I have been able to list. The first is the trigger phase, which could definitely be something external, and sometimes it's even the near death experience that triggers this this phase in people's journey. And I want to point out here that even if you've not been meditating, or even if you are not someone who's inclined spiritually, we have to understand that this could happen to anyone, because we are essentially spirit, and the spirit is our deepest part. And when external circumstances end up affecting that deepest part, it does create that kind of wake-up call for the ego, so that the personality realizes that what it believed to be true is not actually true, and there are multiple layers that it has to shed to be able to reach a stage where it is confident and equipped enough spiritually and energetically to carry on the journey with faith. So the first is the trigger process, and the second phase is the stage of withdrawal. This is when because of that sense of shock that the ego faces, it's going to withdraw from everything because it does not know how to function. There is a lot of inner conflict that the ego experiences at this time, and it's almost like an upheaval and chaos. And in order to sort of conserve the energy, or in order to make sense of what's going on, there will be a phase of withdrawal from people, from routines, from day-to-day lifestyle, from habits, from obligations, etc. And this is, I think, an important phase also, because the dark night of the ego experience is a life-changing experience, and whenever it happens to you and when you come out of it, you will not be the same person. So it's important to be able to honor and really breathe through each of these stages. And after the withdrawal stage comes the stage of the ego death, which is essentially the chrysalis stage, because the ego has realized that it is just a mirage, it is just a mask that is on the soul, on the spirit, and the ego realizes that it does not actually exist, and that it is just a means to an end. So the ego death process is when you will begin to probably question everything in your life. And I do cover this point later on in the do's and don'ts, but this is something that I want to mention here as well, that it's important not to take any major life-changing decisions during this process. It's essential that you make note of it, whether you write it down or you talk to someone about it, but wait for this entire process to be completed to make the kind of changes that sort of come to your notice during the process. So after the ego death process comes the stage of rebirth, and rebirth is when you are able to reconnect with yourself, and this is when you also returned to that connection with the source, and you begin to feel supported again, and all that mental emotional heaviness begins to subside. And rebirth is the time which is, as the word itself says, that this is when you will be able to return to the supposed normalcy of life, and all your obligations and your routines, etc., in the physical reality will see you returning to them. And when you come out of it, as I said, there will be a time when you will make a lot of changes, and it's only after that sense of heaviness has subsided, because there are a lot of things that we have to make sure that we don't rush into or rush out of, because when we do see the truth, we have to keep this in mind, that the universe does like a certain order and a certain timeliness in things. The rebirth process will more often than not be accompanied with a lot of energy, and most of the times it is rebellious energy, when you want to change a lot of things and when you want to perhaps tell people what they are doing wrong, etc. But it's important that you stay in your own lane, you stay in your own energy, and you are able to take the necessary steps only for your own life. And lastly, I want to discuss some points in the do's and don'ts part. The first and the very important part is that you will not feel like it, but it's important that you continue your spiritual practices. It's important to stay connected. As I said previously, that while this is a very important phase in your growth, it also is essentially a test of your resolve, of how committed you are to your spiritual growth, to returning to your innocence, to returning to your core values, etc. So it's important that your spirit is nourished. You may not feel the results of those practices, etc., immediately, but everything does get added up. And this is something that you will be thankful for to yourself, that this is something that you continued. The second suggestion that I wanted to make is that it's important to understand and rather acknowledge and accept that all on this journey go through this process, and sometimes people go through it multiple times during their lifetimes, and sometimes even multiple times during a particular year. There are I do not want to sort of put a timeline on how long this lasts, but there are certain mini dark nights of the ego that a lot of light workers and healers and energy intuitives go through during their process, during their work, during their healing work. And so this will definitely give you a sense of support. And the third point is connected to this one, that do not withdraw from your friends and loved ones, even though you will be tempted to. This is important because while if perhaps there is a certain external experience there is an external loss that has triggered the dark night of the ego for you, your friends and loved ones should know, so that they know how to care for you. And whatever it is that you need during this time, please let them know, because the darkness can get really heavy at times. I do not mean to scare anyone, but it's important to be prepared for such an experience. It's also important because if there are people in your social group or people around you who've had similar experiences, they will be able to guide you through it. And this is one experience which I can definitely vouch for, that this is an experience that someone in your circle should certainly know about, because this is not something that you want to go through alone. Even though we are not alone, I understand that, but this is a time when there is a sense of disconnect, and whatever it is that you can do to maintain a sense of connection with your loved ones and your well-wishers on the outside, please make sure that you do that. The next point is that ease your loads, but do not ignore your self-care. You will be tempted to you'll fall into this this sort of lack of routine of not wanting to do the very mundane things, the kind of things that sustain our natural life cycle and our day-to-day things. And while you are questioning your reality, but please do not ignore taking care of yourself, because this is a phase, and it's important to keep this in mind, that this is a phase and that it will get over. While I say that, do not try to get out of it, because there is no way around it. This is something that you will have to go through, and yes, it's a difficult process, but then this is, as they say, that not everyone makes it to the higher realities, because these are the kind of experiences that people get scared by when their reality is challenged, when their perception of truth is challenged. There is a sense of fear that everything might fall apart, and it literally has to, and you have to build everything back up. But that is the whole point of this experience, to test your faith and your resolve, because once you go through this, you will have immense support on the other side of this experience, and you will see a lot of positive changes happening in your life after this experience. So the next point is that slow down, review and reflect over areas of your life. This is something that I've already talked about before, that this will be a time when you will receive a lot of insights, etc., about the kind of changes that you need to make. So please do that. Honor whatever insights and emotions come up, but do not take any life-changing decisions during this phase, and it's best to wait for the sense of connection to return. And lastly, this phase can be used to heal, so focus just on that. That's all I have for now to say on this topic. So thank you everyone for listening in, and I shall talk to you soon again. Bye.